Hello and welcome to Old Lady Plays. I'm Kate, the Old Lady, and this is Advanced Squad Leader, Scenario T2, the Puma Prowls. Turn 1 is in this video, and that's going to be a fairly short turn because it's a fairly big board and they're not really advancing to contact very quickly because they're at opposite corners of the board. So it's this turn is not going to be very exciting. There's no shooting. I'll warn you right now. But there is, I think, a fairly detailed explanation of what the counters mean so that you can get to know the vehicles being used in this scenario. And then an examination of how the moves happened in the first turn. And then we move on to the next episode. So it's not very long, but I hope you'll enjoy it. And here we go. So we have here the PSW 234-2 counter, which is what the Germans have. All four of the Germans are driving this, so that's handy. And as you can see, there's a lot of information presented on these counters. I'm going to try and break that down for you in this section. In this one, I'm pointing to the 33 movement points and the fact that it's an armored car, which is shown by the white circle behind the movement points. Here we see that there is 4 armor front and 1 armor at the sides and back, as you can see from the 2 numbers there that I pointed to. This one's a little more complex, so we'll have a look at it. At the bottom, we've got no bow MG, that's the dash before the slash, and 1 coaxial MG, which is to say, excuse me, which is to say a machine gun which is coaxial with the turret. So it's always facing where the gun is facing. And it's got a firepower of 5. So that's useful. It's not very much in this scenario actually, because the machine guns are useless against other armored vehicles, but you know, it's good to know what that means. The F up in the left corner there is the unit identifier. There's a different one for each unit in the game, and the fact that there's no box or circle around it means that it has normal ground pressure. I put it down as medium, but it's actually normal. So that's that for the front part of the counter. Let's carry on and look at the back part of the counter. Oh, actually no, there's more on the front here. Sorry. Just give me a second. We'll get to that here now. So we have a thin white square, as you can see from the top arrow here. There's a thin white square going all the way around. That means it's got a slow turret. Alright, that will affect how quickly it how accurate the gun is when you need to change the turret covered arc to shoot. ROF means rate of fire. What that means is if when shooting this gun gets a 2 or 1 on the colored die of the 2-die roll, then excuse me, then the tank has retained rate and will be able to continue firing just like a machine gun. And lastly, we've got a 50mm gun with a long barrel. That's what the L means on the end of 50. 50L means a 50mm gun with a long barrel. That means it's more accurate than a 50mm gun with a regular barrel. So let's have a look at the back of the counter now. Alright, we've got the whole back of the counter covered in this one thing here. At the top you'll see we've got AP, that's armor piercing ammo. Oh, I see, it's missing a space. Sorry about that. 5 in 43 and 4 in 44. What that means is if when trying for that particular type of ammo we roll higher than 5 in 1943 or 4 in 1944 on 2 dice, then it doesn't have that kind of ammo. So we are actually playing in 1944, so this one will count as a 4 for the armor-piercing ammo. Smoke discharge or depletion number, that's this one here, works the same way as the armor-piercing ammo, and gives you a number that will tell you whether or not you have run out of smoke when you used it this time. And a smoke discharger dispenses smoke within the same hex as the vehicle discharging it. Lastly, we have crew survival 4, and that is the chance of crew surviving when the tank is destroyed. So that's, 4 is not bad. There are better, there are worse. But that's it for the German side. So I hope you find that useful. We're going to do the same thing for the Russian one in a moment. Let's do that. Alright, so here's the Soviet counter, and it's for the T-70 tank, of which the Soviets have 5 in this scenario. There are 14 movement points on the tank. Importantly, in the first turn, and the Russians do go first, the tanks will only have 7 movement points. They're considered to have expended half their movement points before they enter the board. So that's going to be really important. Anyway, as you can see here, 14 movement points and fully tracked. We can tell it's fully tracked because the oval behind the 14 is white, and it's oval shaped, which gives us more of a suggestion of the wheel of the treads of a tank, rather than the circle behind the 33 on the German counter, which gave us the armored car wheel. Alright, so that's what we mean. Fully tracked, 14 movement points. Let's roll on to see what the rest of the things are on this. Right, we have 6 armor front and 4 armor sides and back. That's a step up from both. That's actually 1 step up on the front and 2 steps up on the sides or back from what the Germans have, so they have better armor. And a white circle behind the 6 means that this tank is a small target, which is a +1 to hit. It's harder to hit. That's important. So it's harder to hit, and they have slightly better armor than the Germans. So yeah. Now you may think that 14 movement points, by the way, is not very many compared to 33 for the armored car, but the armored car has to use a different movement chart than the tanks do, and it costs a lot more for open ground for an armored car than it does for a tank. So it's they're fairly comparable in their speed, except when they get on the roads. That's where the armored car really tells. Anyway, that's enough with that part. Let's look at the next piece of this. As we skim ahead, I think we're going to look at, yes. Again, we have E, the unit identifier, and this time it's in a box. And the box means that it's low ground pressure. That's really important because that will affect chances to bog down in mud or muddy ground, things like that. So that's important to know. Similarly, this has no bow machine gun and a coaxial 2 firepower machine gun. It won't matter in this scenario. Again, the armored vehicles will ignore machine gun fire anyway, so we won't be firing machine guns. So that's that part, and then we have a thick broken white square. You see this thick square that runs around the counter here and how it's broken at the corners. That means it has a one-man turret, which is really important. A one-man turret is very slow to traverse, and it also means that it cannot fire while crew is exposed. What that means is if the tank is not buttoned up, like the hatches are closed and the crew inside, they can't fire the main gun. Alright, it's just because of the way that the turret works. So they have to be buttoned up to be able to fire the gun, and that's a really important thing because being buttoned up slows you down a lot. So they've got an interesting sort of dimension to their game here when they have to decide when to be exposed and when to button up. Likewise, they have a 45mm gun with a long barrel. It's a slightly smaller gun than the Germans have, but it's effective and it's not that much smaller, and the Germans have less armor, so it balances out pretty tightly. Let's see what we've got with next. I think we're going to the back of the counter now. Yes. Alright, so AP ammo 4 and 42, 5 and 43, 6 and 44, 7 and 45. Again, we are in 1944, so that gives us a 6 for this one. Also, this tank is, that's what the big R is for, radioless before 1943. Thankfully, it's 1944, so we don't have to worry about that. And as you can see, the crew survival on this tank is very poor. 2 for a 2 dice roll is not a very good chance of crew survival. So that's going to do it for that. Let's just run out the clock on that. A little bit of film. Okay, so let's start looking at the first turn. We are going straight to the move phase because there isn't really anything else to do in this first couple of turns except move and possibly shoot in the later part of the second turn. But in the first turn, they're not going to spot each other, so we're just going to deal with the move. And the first movement point expended by the, or movement factor I should say, expended by the Soviet tanks as they come on will be their 8th, because they've expended half of their movement per scenario rule before entering the board. So they only have 14, which means they have 7 left to go. Here's the 8th, starting right away. So he comes on, skirts along the edge of the board, cuts inside a little bit, bypasses the woods, and stops. Well, doesn't stop. He's still in motion right there. Tank number 2 comes along behind, follows exactly the same path, avoids the marsh, and ends up in bypass. Tank number 3 follows the same path. Now, not wanting to stack up too deep, I've taken the other 2 and put them in a different direction. So they're going to go along the north edge of the board there. I don't know whether it's the north edge, the top edge of the board. He ends up in bypass. And here comes the last one. Onto the board. Now, important to know about these is that excuse me, they are all CE at the moment. They're all crew exposed. I haven't marked them because it just doesn't make sense at the moment to mark them. They will be buttoning up next turn because they might be firing and they need to be buttoned up to fire. So that'll happen, but not now. The other thing is that I have not placed the armor leaders in any of the tanks on either side. And the reason for that is I don't want to prejudice myself in terms of putting it in a convenient or inconvenient place. So I'm going to randomize which tank has the armor leader as soon as anything gets into a sort of battle-y sort of way. So once I do, I'll place the armor leader on the tanks or the armored car which has the leader in it. Okay, so let's go and look at the Germans. Alright, the Germans, by comparison, have 33 movement points, but they're armored cars, so they don't get to move quite as smoothly over open ground as tanks do. So let's watch how this one works out. Here come the Germans. Onto the board, cutting across to the road where they're much faster. They are also, of course, all crew exposed. And moving up the road and out into the village where they remain in motion. Next, another one following exactly the same route. La, 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 and turn to stay in motion. Now the third comes up, gets to the road, goes up a couple more, and then turns and stops. That's important. And this one also turns and stops. Right, so there's the final German positions. Remember that the two closest to the Russians are still in motion. The two farthest from the Russians are stopped. So they will have to expend a start MP or MF, I can't remember which is which, to get going next turn. But that's pretty much it for the movement this turn. And that's pretty much it for the turn, because there aren't any things to do like routes or rallies or advance phase or shooting or anything else. So rather than skip through all of the phases and say nothing happens, I'm just going to say nothing happens. And that's going to pretty much do it for this episode. We will be back on Sunday with the next episode, which will be turn 2, and I expect that we might get a little more fireworky once that happens, as the armored cars are now into the town and ready to start ripping up the roads, getting to grips with these Soviets. So I'm interested to see how it goes. In the German case, I have separated them into two elements of 2. Hopefully these will be able to be mutually supportive. And the goal for the Germans here is to send 2 into the middle to be able to fight, and 2 to guard the exit on that side of the board. If the Russians want to come across this side of the board, that's fine, but they're going to move a lot more slowly through all the open ground than they would on the roads. So if we can force them to divert across to board 4, that'll be a good thing for us, as far as I'm concerned, as far as the Germans are concerned. Excuse me, the Soviets also have split into 2 elements, obviously one of 2, one of 3, and I think they're going to be very happy with how that's going to work out as well. That's going to do it for this episode. I hope that you have enjoyed it. I will be back. I know it was kind of a short one, but I'll be back with more in the next episode, next Sunday, and we'll have turn 2. And let's see what happens then, because I think the fireworks will start in earnest. Alright? Have a good day. In fact, have a great day. And take care.